Hello everyone, welcome to the Set and Boolean lecture. So briefly, let's quickly look at what sets are. And sets are basically unordered collections of unique elements, meaning they can only be one representative of the same object, which means that you can only have unique elements in your set. So let's see some examples of how sets work in details. Alright, so there are majorly two object types in Python that we should quickly cover, which are sets and booleans. And first, we're going to talk about sets. So to create a set, remember I said that sets are an unordered collections of unique elements, which means that we can construct them by using the set function. So let's go ahead and make a set and see how it works in more detail. So for example, I can say a variable name, let's say x in this case, and I'll say x is equals to, and I'm going to say set into parentheses, right? I'm going to run this, and let's go ahead to add a particular value to the set by using the .add method. So I can say x.add, and I'm going to put it into parentheses right here. I'm going to put 1. When I run this cell and I check in my x, you will see that now we now have our set, which is equals to 1. So if you notice, you will see that sets are basically storing their values inside a curly brace. That does not actually indicate a dictionary, because you might want to get this confused. So though you can draw an analogy as a set being a dictionary with only keys, that would actually work fine. But you need to know that set only contains unique values. So what happens if we try to, let's say, add something that was already in the set, right? Let's take a look at the example together. So for example, I'm going to say x.add, and I'm going to put into brackets here. I'm going to say 1 again. I'm going to run this. In the real sense of it, we're supposed to have 1 return twice. But if I go ahead to check my x, you will see that we still have 1, which means that it does not accept duplicate values. So now let's go ahead to add another value. I can say x.add, and I'm going to add what? 2, right? If I run this cell and I check my x, you will see that now we now have 1 and 2. And basically that's how sets work in a nutshell, right? But you need to notice how it won't replace another one. So what we can do is we can actually cast a list with a multiple repeat elements to a set to get the unique elements out of it. Now, what am I talking about? For example, if we have something like this, I'm going to say my list 1, and I'm going to say is equals to, and here I'm going to pass in multiple items, right? I'll just say 1, 1. All right, I'll say 2, 2. I'll say 3, 4. Then I'll say 5, 6, and I'm going to add couples of 1 again, 1, 1, right? So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to say set into bracket. I'm going to put what? List 1. I'm going to go ahead to run this cell, and you can see that when we run this cell, we are now having what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which means that the set basically filtered out all the unique items in this list and just return the unique items only, right? So that's one thing you should take note of, right? And that's pretty much the basics about sets. Now let's go ahead to talk more about booleans. So now that we already have an idea of how sets works, the last object we're going to be covering is booleans, right? And what are booleans? Basically, booleans are operator that basically allows you to convey a true or false statement. And this is very, very important, because later on, when we deal with control flow and logic, they are pretty much going to come in handy. So booleans are very, very important. Let's quickly take a look at some examples working with booleans. Alright guys, with that being said, let's quickly have an overview of what booleans are, and in our upcoming lecture we're going to dive deeper into what booleans are. But for now, let's go ahead to cover the basics. So for now, I'm going to create a variable a. I'm going to assign it to be what? True. Now, one thing you should take note of here is when you are creating booleans, the first letter is always a capital letter. So you have capital letter T, R, U, and capital letter F, A, L, S, E. It's very, very important, because I see most beginners making this mistake by trying to create a boolean and assigning it to a small letter T, R, U, E, which wouldn't work in Python, right? So if I go ahead to run this cell and then I check the value of A, you can see that A is saying that is what? True, right? So quick thing that you can also do to specify or to basically check what value you have in A, you can say something like type, remember, type of what? A. and you're going to see that's going to return a what? A bool right here, right? So that's one of the great ways to know that you are working with booleans in Python. So for example, I can also try to check some statements and see if it's actually true or false. So one interesting thing to know is Python also come with booleans, which means that if you try to check in some statement, it's going to return either that statement is true or false back to you. So for example, if I try to do something like 1 greater than 2, and I run this cell, you're going to see that it's going to return what? False. It's just trying to tell us that this is a false statement. 1 is not greater than 2. Also, we can use a none as a placeholder for an object that we don't want to assign yet. So for example, I can say my A is equals to none. And basically what this means is we're just trying to say, okay, we don't want to assign it any value right now. We just want A to be none, right? And if I go ahead to print out what I have in A, so if I say print into brackets, I'll say A, and you're going to see here that we have what? None, right? All right, so let's take a look at some quick examples extra. Let's say I want to do is 3 greater than 2. You're going to see it's going to return what's true, because obviously 3 is greater than 2. A quick thing that we can do here is we can actually use a control flow statement that checks if a condition is true or false. So for example, I can say if, don't worry if you are just seeing this for the first time, and just try to copy what I'm doing, right? So I can say if 1 is greater than 2, I'm going to put a semicolon right here, click enter, right? There's going to be indentation, which is this space that you're seeing right here. And I'm going to say print into parentheses, and I'm going to say 1 is greater than 2. And right here, I can say else, right? I'll say else, I'll say print 1 is not greater than 2, right? So if I run this cell, what's going to happen? Basically, this is an if statement, and we are going to talk more about this in our upcoming lecture. I just wanted to quickly show you an example. So what this does is it checks if 1 is greater than 2. If it is greater than 2, then this statement is going to work. That means it is true, right? But if it is false, then that means it is going to run. For this case, obviously 1 is less than 2, so it's going to run 1 is not greater than 2, right? So if I run this cell, you're going to see 1 is not greater than 2. So this is just a quick scenario of how true or false statements can be used in Python. It checks for the condition, and if it's true, it runs the statement under that particular block of code. And that's it for now, and you should now have a basic understanding of Python objects and data structure types in general. So now we've talked about numbers, we've talked about strings, we've talked about lists, we've also talked about dictionary, tuples, set and booleans, and we should pretty much have a basic understanding of Python object and data structure. That will be all for now, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.